actually, I was hoping to start us off with a question before I talked a little bit, and this can go to Donna or Jane, or both of you can tag team. I know the DevOps test engineering course is just out. Our first offering is coming up extremely quickly. I wanted to ask, how does this fit with what you guys talked about? I know we talk a lot about how these roles are important to the ITSM and DevOps space. How is DTE going to fit in with that?
So Donna, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
Well, I have a feeling we might say the same thing. Here's what the first thing I would say, and here's why I scrolled back to this particular slide. One of the things that DevOps test engineering, the DTE course, introduces is the fact that everybody's a tester in a DevOps environment. So, you know, folks like Agile process owners need to be looking at what tests can be written in order to ensure that their process controls are in place. So DTE as a certification really helps to bring that concept to life, that everybody's a tester. Historically, we thought of testing as solely the domain of the QA department, but in reality, developers today are writing test-driven. You know, the concept of test-driven development, where they're writing tests before they even start writing code. Process owners and process managers for things like capacity, availability, continuity have to be thinking about what kind of performance tests can they be writing, and then automating to ensure that the code's going to meet those service levels once they're deployed. Change managers have to be looking at incorporating tests that make sure that we're not violating any of the change management policies, and we're in fact capturing the information we have to about the changes in order to satisfy not only our process, but in a lot of cases our auditors. So everybody's a tester in the DevOps environment, and DTE helps us explain that.
I agree, and just to add one more thing to the end of that, you know, you spoke a lot about I-shaped, T-shaped, pie-shaped, and comb-shaped people. Well, this is part of that, right? Where the day of where we have a specialist who's the only one that knows how to test, or a team that is the only one that has that competency. Now we're moving into T-shaped, pie-shaped, and comb-shaped people. And one of the key skills that almost everyone in IT needs to develop right now is the ability to write test plans, to automate test, or to be able to read test logs. So as Donna said, everybody's a tester.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Karen.
Okay, we have a question from Andre, and Andre is asking, how does the end user services function participate in and be a valuable contributor to a DevOps environment?
I'm sorry, Karen. Go ahead, Donna. No, go for it. So
I would say, first of all, that if you look at what Agile is all about, if you look at what Scrum is all about, you know, what Agile and Scrum practices do is try to make sure that you're capturing that end user feedback, and you're using that end user feedback in order to develop and improve your software. So the user, here, I'll use my drawing. So if we look at, you know, if we look at Agile, that feedback is being used to make decisions about what kind of changes we're going to make to our software, because we always want to aim to first put out a minimum viable product, get some feedback on that product, and then go from there. The greatest waste in software development is developing features that nobody's ever going to utilize. So that feedback is critical. And I have to say, just because I was a service desk manager at one point in my career, I do think here's where we really need to also understand the importance of processes like incident and problem management, because the reality is, despite all best efforts, at the end of the day, customers are going to have questions about the software product, how to use it, or they're going to report an incident that in fact turns out perhaps to be a request for something new, for some new feature, or for a feature to function differently. So here's where it's so important that the incident and problem management processes that historically we've used in the development environment get married to the product backlog and to the bug tracking processes that have historically been used in the development environment, so that feedback gets moved very quickly. You know, one of the really kind of key values of DevOps is fast feedback, fast flow left to right, but fast feedback right to left. So making sure that we're capturing that user feedback and very, very quickly passing that back and providing it as input into the development environment. So hopefully that, did I answer the question? Hopefully that made sense.
Well, and I'll just add one more thing to it, Donna, because I think you gave a great answer to the question. I think one of the challenges in DevOps is that we talk a lot about continuous delivery and continuous deployment and agile software development and software delivery. And you always kind of want to stop at the end of that and go, and then what? Right? So it goes into production and the cycle starts again. And now that's where value is being delivered. So the end user organization, whether it's the service desk or problem management or incident management, has to play a critical role both before and after deployment, because whatever is being delivered is hopefully going to live in production and deliver value on an ongoing basis. And if we don't have the capability to administer and support it in an agile way, then, you know, are we any better off than we are before? So it has to be a continuum, and it doesn't stop at deployment, right? It has to be continuous operations as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, anybody who's heard me talk about the service desk before, you've heard me say this before, if you don't have a complaint process built into your service desk processes, you need to do that now. Because a lot of times the complaints, what we view as complaints, are really, we have to just understand that the fact that a customer took the however many seconds or minutes out of their day in order to provide you feedback is invaluable. So the service desk, a big role a service desk can play today is to make sure that that feedback finds its way back into the development environment, and that we change this notion of a complaint being something negative and really start to view it as positive feedback that's just going to let us be a better organization.
Good point, Donna. Thank you. Sergio has a question. He's asking, given staffing size restrictions, what would be the ideal combination of these roles with other ones already existing?
So I'm sorry, Karen, can you repeat that, please?
I can. Given staffing size restrictions, what would be the ideal combination of these roles with other ones already existing?
Okay, Donna, you were starting, so go for it.
Yeah, well, so the way I would answer that question is first to just highlight one of the words we've been using, and that is the concept of role. These are roles versus job descriptions. So if you're a process owner today, then something like understanding more about Agile service management or what it means to be an Agile process owner is really just going to expand and improve your ability to be effective in your job. So they're not mutually exclusive. So an Agile service manager and an Agile change manager, for example, aren't mutually exclusive. We were really in this presentation just trying to emphasize some of the really critical roles in the context of things like DevOps and SRE. But the more you expand your understanding and your knowledge of Agile concepts, of DevOps concepts, the more effective you're going to be as a process owner. So they're roles, they're hats that you wear in the course of doing your job. And as part of being a lifelong learner, I mean, that's kind of what a cone-shaped person is all about. It's like you're a lifelong learner and you're constantly on a quest to better understand all of the available frameworks and approaches that you can use. And then you're trying to figure out how to apply them to best meet the needs of your organization. So I wouldn't look at this presentation and think, oh, we have to add 2 new job positions or 3 new job positions. I would really look at how you can educate the people within your organization today to better help them understand Agile service management and DevOps concepts. I've said this before, if you are a change manager in an organization today, if you are a release manager in an organization today, you have to understand DevOps. You have to understand site reliability engineering. If you're an incident or a problem management process owner today, because they are, it's not even like they are the future, they are the now. And even if you're just getting started, they're coming, and they're coming fast into your organization. So think of them as roles, hats that you wear, knowledge that you have, as opposed to a job position.
And I absolutely agree with that. I think in the early days of ITIL, we advocated against combining roles. Like we always used to say, you know, incident and problem shouldn't be the same role, right? Change and config shouldn't be the same role. But, you know, that was a waterfall environment where everything was very, very linear. And in today's very iterative world, where we're almost looking at microprocesses, the same way we're looking at microservices. You look at roles like a site reliability engineer, which really couples so many different processes under that role description, that it makes more sense to become, as Donna said, more cone-shaped or more pie-shaped, and to be more multidimensional than ever before, because they are just roles, right? They are just roles. And so, you know, you might have multiple process managers now, still single process owner, but the need to be more agile does require that we have a less linear approach to roles as well as to process.
Thank you, ladies. Robert has a question. He's saying, with this shift to agile service management roles, are you seeing that organizations still have a centralized service management office, or are they becoming decentralized?
Oh, Donna, can I take this one first?
I was going to say, would you take that one? Because it's an interesting question.
It is an interesting question, and I can't tell you that it's going one way or the other. I think that the concept of a PMO and SMO, and hopefully never a DOO, right, a DevOps office, you know, had some validity in its day, meaning that, you know, the risk was that it would become another kind of, you know, ivory tower, centralized place, and fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you hear about it, some PMOs are now being broken down, and the project management role is starting to be embedded more in the squads or the teams. So I don't know that organizations are tearing down their SMOs or trying to reconfigure them. I think that when you start to look at the introduction of concepts like site reliability engineering, the SMO takes on a different flavor, right? So whether that evolves with the evolution of agile service management or not, you know, one of the things that in DevOps we've been very cautionary about is, you know, don't set up a DevOps department, right? Don't, you know, and some organizations do and some don't. You know, from an HR perspective, does that make sense? Maybe. Do we want the knowledge to be more broad-based across the value stream? Do we want people to be more cone-shaped or pie-shaped than eye-shaped? And is part of that evolution, you know, kind of re-examining the concept of these offices? I don't know the answer yet to that, but I would tell you that the trend is to really cross-pollinate, and the concept of these offices was at some point almost HR, and I think that they're just starting to be re-examined. I don't think there's a trend necessarily yet, but I could see that the trend is more to take that skill and really drive it down into the teams, or, you know, where some people are calling them squads.
And I think the thing I would add to this is that I think what has to be looked at is the spirit or the intent of these offices. You know, one of the last lines in our presentation is control without being controlling. So I think historically these offices got a little bit overly controlling. And so I think there's a tremendous opportunity for a service management office. And in fact, we talk about this a little bit in Certified Agile Process Owner. having the service management office really morph into an organization that serves as a community of practice that looks at what are these Agile service management practices, how can we pare down our processes and yet still achieve the objectives that we need to meet with our processes, especially for some of you who have maybe regulated environments where you've got auditors in the mix. You know, what the service management office can do is help kind of bridge that gap between, okay, what are the controls that we absolutely have to have in place, and how can we marry those controls to fast flow across the organization. I also think in the case of IT service management, you know, one of the reasons why ITIL recommends a service management office is so that the processes owners understand they have to work together. So who cares if you have a really great incident management process if it's not feeding your problem management process, or if it's not working effectively in relation to your change management process? So IT service management is an integrated process approach, right? So these process owners need to work together, and the service management office is a way for them to do that, is the vehicle for them to do that. And I think today, with so many processes that need to be improved in order to support DevOps and SRE, I can see an organization having a real challenge with what's priority and what's most important. And potentially, if you've got process owners going off doing their own thing, you could start to have conflicts where one process actually, in an effort to improve, negatively impacts some other process. So the SMO can serve as that community of practice that makes sure that we all are educated and understand the organizational goals and our DevOps goals and our SRE goals, and we're adapting our IT service management processes in support of those. And not just all off doing our own thing.
Thanks. Thank you both. I have a little bit of an announcement here. So when Eric came in and he was offering the minimum viable IT service management workshop, a lot of you went in and registered for that. So that class has filled up for the July 31st workshop. So the next one will be September 8th. So if you're interested in the minimal viable IT service management workshop, go on the website and log into that September, schedule yourself for the September 8th one before that one gets filled up as well.
And you know, I'm getting some, what is it, ESP from our COO, who says, if you'd like to bring this workshop or any of our workshops to your organization, please chat us, call us, or email us anytime, and we can work it out with you.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Karen.
And Mike is asking, are there examples of instances where DevOps would not be appropriate to use over IT service management?
So I think there's a little risk in that kind of question, and Donna, I'll be interested in seeing your agreement. You know, one of the things in IT that's really interesting that differentiates us from any other department or unit in the business is that we love our frameworks, right? We love our frameworks more than any other business unit, and we have loyalists on any other side. So whether you call it DevOps or IT service management, at the end of the day, I think that services will always need to be managed, and there are definitely environments where more control is necessary, you know, particularly in regulatory environments. I think that's significant. Although I would share that I think that automated pipelines in many ways give you better evidence, because, you know, the automation is consistent from deployment to deployment, and may meet some of your regulatory requirements, and I think that's fine. I think that whether it's DevOps or Agile or ITSM or ITIL or COVID or pick any of the other frameworks, the question then becomes, do we need to increase the flow of work? Probably, right? I mean, depending on the nature of your business, I can't think of a business that doesn't need to go faster. I can think of a lot of businesses that don't necessarily need to drop code 50 times a day, right? But if you're doing, you know, once a quarter and you want to speed that up, or you're doing, you know, once a year and you want to speed that up, that's faster flow. So I think just the cautionary tale from my side is be careful of the framework loyalty. right? It isn't ITSM versus DevOps, or it isn't ITSM versus Agile. You know, DevOps Institute formed a strategic relationship with Scrum.org for just that reason, right? Where we are actually looking at the cross-pollination of competencies and the flow of Agile and DevOps, so it doesn't become a, is this one better for us or not? Every organization needs to be Agile, right? And not Agile software development. We need to be Agile enough in the dictionary definition, and just a little caution about, you know, be careful of a little bit of that, you know, that kind of framework, you know, framework approach. I'll end it with, you know, you look at accountants. You know, accountants have generally accepted IT principles, right? And they all apply it. You know, they adapt it to their vertical market or the needs of their organization, but gap is everywhere. And someday IT will be the same way. Sorry, getting off my soapbox, but I'm always a little cautious when I hear about, you know, is one framework going to be more appropriate than the other? Take that with all due respect. Donna, do you want to add to that?
No, I think I'm saying the same thing. It's not an either or question. It really isn't. It's an and. It's always an and conversation with all of these different frameworks. And I think that's really what the slide is trying to illustrate, is that all of these frameworks, Agile, IT service management, you know, Jane mentioned Lean, we can use a model, and the more you learn about these different frameworks, the more you better understand how they all help each other, they all dovetail from one to another. The other thing I think I'll say in relation to DevOps and IT service management is, remember, at the end of the day, what DevOps is about is delivering software. There are absolutely, in enterprises today, still whole entire areas that IT service management handles that doesn't have to do with software. You're still managing your customers' desktops. You're still managing your users' mobile devices. Many of you are still managing your data centers, and all of your IT service management processes are still really relevant to that. It's just really important that you understand that in the context of DevOps, those IT service management processes have to be adapted. And ITIL, if you really understand ITIL, it provides all kinds of guidance about how to scale your processes. That's why we talked about models several times throughout this presentation. It gives you all kinds of guidance on how to do that. So it's not an either or conversation, it's an and conversation.
Thank you, ladies. I have a question from Stephanie, and Stephanie says that she's currently a Scrum Master in a business tools group, and she's interested in the Service Manager, and she wants to know if any of the courses discuss how to handle Scrum ceremonies in a service-based organization.
So that's really what Certified Agile Service Manager is about. What the Certified Agile Service Manager course does is, first of all, it introduces Scrum. You actually learn as much about Scrum in Certified Agile Service Manager as you would becoming a Scrum Master. We're pretty close to it, I guess I should caveat. And then we adapt the roles and the artifacts and the events or the ceremonies to how you use those ceremonies, since that was the premise of the question, in the context of process design and improvement. So that either Certified Agile Service Manager, which is the counterpart to a Scrum Master, or Certified Agile Process Owner, which is the counterpart to Product Owner in Scrum. Either one of those two courses will help you understand how to adapt those roles and artifacts and events to process design and improvement. And Jane and I have to say, became Scrum Masters together. We sat through our Scrum Master class together. And it was a really fun couple of days. And I remember turning to Jane at the time and saying, oh, this changes everything, right? I do have to say that when I became a Scrum Master, it shifted the way I thought about kind of everything we do. And I know it was the same way for Jane, and Agile Service Management was really born from that. So
it was, and I will share with you one thing, because I've been really, you know, thinking about and looking at adapting some of the DevOps concepts into Agile Service Management as well. And two things have really kind of emerged. So in DevOps, we talk about breaking down monolithic applications, right? So that's a very key concept that's really emerged in DevOps, right? Take your monolithic applications and break them down into microservices. Well, I've started to think a lot about process and said, are we looking at monolithic process? And is Agile service management with the incremental approach really looking at breaking down into microprocess? So, I leave you guys with that thought to say, okay, is there another way to equate this? To say, yeah, in a waterfall way, a monolithic application or a monolithic process made a lot of sense. In a DevOps Agile world, do we look at microprocesses to support microservices? And so, I encourage input on that, because I think that it is part of the new way of thinking, and really taking a lesson from our developer colleagues and saying, okay, if you're figuring out a way to be more agile, how does that translate into the management of the products and services that sit behind it? So just food for thought.
Thank you. Ken has a question, and he wants to know, how do I convince company management that ITIL and IT service management is an important part of customer support quality and should be introduced into our company processes and functionality?
Oh, I'll give that one to Donna.
Well, so let's talk about what ITIL and IT service management are all about. They're about best practices for managing and delivering services. So what a framework like ITIL is designed to do is help your organization improve and better meet your goals and do it more quickly. So rather than reinventing the wheel, because the reality is you handle incidents, you handle problems, your service desk is getting requests for service, and you have to have processes in place for handling all of those things. So rather than reinventing the wheel and kind of starting with a clean sheet of paper, which is historically how we designed processes, let's start with a framework. Let's understand that lots of people have come before you and have proven practices that are proven to be successful, and let's leverage those, and then let's marry that to the concept of Agile service management and take an iterative and incremental approach to improving those processes, and we're able to really reap the benefits very, very quickly of all that guidance. Again, instead of having to kind of go on feeling the pain or having to go through a long and laborious process design effort where we, all kind of fight out what we think is the best way of doing things, let's look to the guidance and let's start there. The other thing I have to say, and I don't know how large your organization is, but one of the things a framework like ITIL does is, and a first benefit of a framework is it introduces a common vocabulary. Now, you might adapt that common vocabulary, you might introduce some different, vocabulary that you use, but I have to say, and I'm going to use it as an example, we attended a site reliability engineering conference recently, and I was fascinated that every single Google person that got up and made a presentation used consistent vocabulary. So they very consistently used terms like incident, and you don't get that, right, by luck. You get that because you've put in place a program that ensures you have a common vocabulary in place, a common understanding of what your processes are. And again, then you are hopefully leveraging best practices in order to adopt and adapt those practices. So I think the answer is to your managers, first of all, it's going to help you get there more quickly. It's going to enable you to improve more quickly. And it also enables you to reap the benefits of a lot of organizations that have come before you on your journey.
And I'll just throw in one sentence. I mean, I think, when we talk about is IT service management still relevant, the question is, do you not want to manage your services? Right? I mean, think about the core definition of IT service management, it's the management of services. So what's the alternative? It has to be a part of your program.
Yes, it does. Thank you, ladies. Javier has a question. He wants to know, what are the main KPIs you use to measure DevOps success?
So I can jump in and add a couple, and I'm sure Donna has a few more. You know, obviously release cycles is considered to be a very core metric for DevOps, right? How fast is the flow from what we call idea to value? And so looking at release cycles and of course, you know, measuring inherently in that the quality of the release, you know, looking at the value delivered to the customer. But in DevOps, you know, there are other metrics that are really significant. There are cultural metrics. There are sustainability metrics. There are throughput metrics. There's bottom line metrics that all go associated with it. I will tell you the one metric that I think is still important, but is not the metric, and that's MTTR, right? So, you know, a lot of organizations consider MTTR, right, mean time to repair, or MTRS, mean time to repair service, as, you know, their key metric. And you kind of want to say, but something broke in order for you to have to, you know, measure MTTR. So I think that there are much more significant metrics that are being introduced, but I also think a more holistic approach to metrics is emerging in DevOps that goes beyond just how fast did you release, or you know, how did the tests go. I think that they're starting to look at multidimensional types of metrics.
Right.
Donna, you want to add?
No, I'm just the same thing. I think what's really important is that you have a balanced set of metrics. You know, some organizations are focusing on things like lead time and cycle time, and the emphasis is on speed, but you have to then also have in place metrics that help you look at quality. So your change success rate or your change failure rate, depending on how you want to look at it. And then certainly MTTR, like those three, you know, things like cycle time, change failure rate, and MTTR, what they really give you is a balanced set of metrics. So maybe because the business wants to be competitive, we're willing to risk moving really quickly. And if we're going to move really, really quickly, we have to be really good at recovering when things go wrong. Right? You can't, you know, because you're perhaps intentionally introducing some risk into your pipeline. So get really good at recovering when things go wrong. But at the same time, you can't slam dunk poor quality into your production environment. So looking at your change success rate, your change, you know, failure rate, that gives you a really balanced picture on what's going on. And it also kind of ties into the concept of DevOps, that, you know, when organizations move really fast, sometimes Dev gets the glory, right? Because they introduced Agile. Now Ops needs to get the glory because they're putting in the practices that enable them to recover very quickly if something goes wrong. Or the QA organization gets a little glory because they're putting in place good testing practices. They're helping the organization, everyone in the company, learn to be a tester so that we've got good quality code. So I think it's so important that you kind of create that balanced view, and that your metrics result in shared responsibility by everybody in the IT value stream for what we're putting out for our customers. Any one singular metric can always, bad things sometimes happen in the name of metrics, right? So you've got to have that balanced view.
Thank you. I have, this is sort of a follow-on of that. Mike is asking the same question about metrics a little bit differently. He said, I saw that metrics were mentioned to measure performance. Are there noticeable differences with suggested metrics for DevOps compared to other frameworks? Or can these metrics be carried across frameworks and provide the same benefit?
So I'll jump in first on that. So Donna said something very significant, and I hope everybody picked up on that, and that's that there has to be shared accountabilities, right? So I think one of the key differences in DevOps is that we all win together or we all lose together, but that the metrics are that there are shared accountabilities across the value stream and across the different teams and organizations, right? So I think that's important. But I also think it's important to realize that your KPIs and your critical success factors that come from the other contributors to the value stream, the ITSM metrics, the Agile metrics, right? Looking at site reliability, engineering metrics, and just general, availability, capacity metrics are still important, right? Nothing here actually supersedes that. So it's really finding a set of metrics that's meaningful to your organization, but making sure that it's inside out and outside in at the same time, right? That we're not only looking at uptime or availability as our key metric, and we're not only looking at MTTR as our key metric, that we're starting to build shared accountability metrics that look at value, or we start to look at, again, like I said before, cultural metrics that look at, employee productivity or innovation, or I heard a great term called entrepreneurship, right? Thinking like a startup. So there are metrics that can be, that are enhancing, but not necessarily replacing everything you've measured before. So it's really just finding that kind of common link that gives you the shared accountabilities, but also leverages the kind of metrics that you've been doing. It also means that some of the things you're measuring, you probably don't need to measure anymore, right? Or that you're measuring, in the old words, you're measuring what you can, not what you should. So I think it's a great opportunity to look at metrics programs.
Right.
Thank you both. Those are all the questions that we have this morning. So I would like to thank both of you, Jane and Donna, both of you, for your great teamwork and for delivering such a great presentation for us today. And I'd like to also thank all of our listeners today, because this was a very, very robust Q&A session with lots of great questions coming in and lots of great information being shared. So I'd like to thank everybody for that.